Hello students, this is a short video to explain the exercise that we'll be doing this week. The exercise we'll be doing is exercise 2 on reading scientific papers and understanding them. And we will not meet this week due to the MLK week. So this video is kind of in lieu of a preview of the lab, and I would watch the video first, then read the document, and then finally do your pre-lab quiz and then your assignment. So let's take a look at exercise 2. This is our Blackboard site. We're in the lab exercises and assignments menu, and we're on week 2. Exercise 2, reading scientific papers. So there are a few things here. I always look at what's on the schedule for the week. A document about how to read scientific papers. The quiz, that's our pre-lab quiz. That is due on January 18 at 11:59. That's a Tuesday night, typical pre-lab quiz time. And then our assignment is a worksheet that's due on Friday at 5 o'clock. Friday, whatever that date is, the 21st, I believe then, at 5 o'clock. And let's take a look at all 3 of these things. So let's start with this document. So this week you're going to be thinking about and actually reading a scientific paper and thinking about how this is done and what's a good way to go about reading science papers, and what are some good ways to go about looking for science papers. So there's a lot of background information in this lab, but just before we get started, I wanted to say that as you move through your career at Grand Valley, you will probably need to look at and understand peer-reviewed science articles at some point in some class. So I teach animal behavior as one of my courses that I regularly teach, and we have students looking at multiple peer-reviewed articles because we're doing research and we want students to compare our research to the research of other people who've already been working on a project. We're interested in learning more about a particular topic, and so the best way to do that is to go to a peer-reviewed article or peer-reviewed articles, read them, understand them, and then sort out how they relate to our questions, our hypotheses, and what we want to do in the lab. And so this is this idea of like learning how to read a science paper and find them is really important for basically your whole career at Grand Valley, if you will, and maybe in your future as well. So the document on exercise 2, reading and explaining scientific papers, has, some of the goals and the objectives like it always does. And then it has some background information, starting with something like, why do we go about publishing? And when did this all start? This is some nice background information about why is it useful to publish information? Well, this is so that we can tell other people what's happening. What have we studied? What have we found? How do our results compare to other people's results? And publishing journal articles is one way that we can disseminate that information. We could also give talks. We could also communicate face-to-face with people. But this is a way that can allow us to reach a broader audience, right? Okay, there's a nice example in this reading from a very early paper, and it's kind of fun to just take a look at how this paper was written. And it's awkward to read, but it's kind of interesting in that it's actually about a smallpox vaccination. In any case, the background information here about reading scientific papers focuses also on, how did this writing and publishing papers come about? So there's a little bit of background information, but we're really interested in, where are we now? How do we write scientific papers? And it turns out we have a very universal style. So when you read a scientific paper from a journal like Ecology or Nature or Psychology Today, you'll see that most of these journals follow a very similar format. It's called the IMRAD or AIMRAD format, and it's one that you probably have seen before, and maybe you've written a report in this format before. But the IMRAD format is an introduction, a methods, a results, and a discussion section. And in this paper, then, you will introduce your hypothesis and background information about your study. You will write about the methods that you used to perform your research. You will tell us the results that you found. What specific results did you find? And finally, you will discuss your results. What do they mean? Do your data support your hypothesis or not? How do these results fit in within the context of other research that's been done? Some papers will also have an abstract or a summary at the front end of the paper that basically summarizes what's happening in the paper. And of course, every paper will have a literature cited or a reference section that's not listed here. So we, in science, follow this very similar format across the board. It helps us actually kind of orient when we're reading an article. We know what to expect. Makes it easier to read them. And reading science articles is kind of hard. All right? So here's some information. It turns out that part of publishing involves a review process. So I have studied variation in behavior in black-capped chickadees over the last couple of years. I'm studying this little songbird that lives right on Grand Valley's campus, and we're looking at how do birds individually differ in the response to presence of a predator at or near a feeder. And to do this, we did all of our research. We wrote up the results of our research, and then we had to put our research or send this paper that we've written up to a journal, a specific journal, and ask the editor, will you accept this research? And the editor then takes the paper, and sometimes the editor says, oh, this doesn't look good at all, and just throws the paper out, rejects it. But most of the time the editor will say, all right, this paper is on personality and black-capped chickadees. I know a couple of people who study something like this, some experts in the field. I'm going to send out this article to those reviewers. They'll review it. They'll review its validity. They'll review its value for the scientific community. And then they'll come back with comments, editorial or review comments, that can help me decide, should I publish this paper in my peer-reviewed journal? And that's what we did. My colleagues and I that worked on this article that I just had published this past year. We sent it off, and it went through a review process, a peer review process, and it's now been published. And because it's published in a peer-reviewed journal, then when we read something like that, we can say, okay, this has been carefully reviewed by experts, it's been edited, and it seems to have value to the scientific community, so it's worth reading. Kind of gives validity. A peer-reviewed process gives validity to the paper, compared to, say, Bob's blog on black-capped chickadees published online by him, right? So we review our articles, and then we get to the reading of scientific papers. It's hard to read scientific papers. I don't know if you've ever done it before, but when you look at a science paper, at first you're like, this is complicated, and it often involves statistical analysis that can be kind of complicated, language that I'm not super comfortable with, maybe even acronyms and things that are specific to the field that to the field of research that's being done that I don't know that much about. It's hard to read scientific papers. And so we gave you, and I want you to focus particularly on a blog post by Jennifer Raft that helps you figure out, how do you go about reading a science paper? Like, you're given this kind of complicated paper, say, okay, go read that and tell me all about it. How do you start? Where do you begin? So Jennifer Raft comes up with several ways, 10 steps or something for reading a paper. And this is going to be useful for you because for your assignment this week, you're going to read one of several science papers and you're going to tell me what it's about in your assignment. Okay. What if you're looking for an article? You're looking to do research. So I'm interested in studying personality in black-capped chickadees. What should I do to find articles that have already been written and published on this subject? Well, I could look at Google Scholar, or I could look at our GVSU website, and I would probably look at the GVSU library to find articles. I like the library databases much better than Google Scholar. Some people like Google Scholar better. But what I need to do is think about, what specific topics am I interested in studying? So I'm looking at black-capped chickadees. I'm interested in that particular species. I'm interested in individual variation or personality. I might be interested in bold versus shy animals, and maybe winter foraging behavior or response to a predator. So those are some of the key phrases or key words I might be looking up. So now if I wanted to, I could go to Google Scholar. That's the information for how to do that. Or I could go to the library library services. I'm going to do that instead. I'm going to go to the databases here. And I like using, there's tons of them, but I like using Web of Science. That's a good place to find lots and lots of science research. So I'm going to go to the W's. I'm going to click on Web of Science, and I am going to look something up. It takes a minute to load. It sure does. Okay, so here I am on the Web of Science, and I am going to type in too bad I can't spell anything, capped chickadees. I've obviously typed this in before. I'm going to add a row. I'm going to type in individual variation. I might add another row. Well, maybe I'll just, maybe I'll add another row. And I'll type in foraging. I don't know if that's going to work or not. Okay, well, this is kind of funny. This is not what I intended. It came up with a list of articles that study kind of these topics. And this is kind of nice because I can look at them. One of them is individual variation in black-capped chickadees, foraging behavior in response to a predator model. This is the article that I published this year with a couple others. And it's in Journal of Comparative Psychology, and it tells me here it's kind of full reference. What if I want to look this one up? Well, I don't because I know this article. So I want to look up individual variation in winter foraging of black-capped chickadees. That's a really old article. It's kind of a classic, but I want to see if it's available at GVSU. So I'm going to click on that. Find this article in full text. Yeah, that's what I want to find it. So sometimes it takes a minute to find the article you're looking for, and you're going to do this for your assignment this week. And here is my nice article, and I've got it. I don't even have to hunt hard for it. It's popped up and ready for me to read. Okay? If the database at the library says, oh, we don't have this available, but you can request it, go ahead and request it. It might only take a day or two for an article to show up. Sometimes it takes up to 14 days, but rarely. So when you can't get the article directly from the Grand Valley websites, from the databases right away, you can request it, and the library will find it for you and will send it to you by email. So that's fantastic. Okay, so in any case, I've found an article that I want, and now I can read all about, individual variation in black-capped chickadees. Now, how do you get a copy of the paper? Well, it's pretty easy on the library databases, but if you can't, you can always request the document. Explaining scientific papers. So after you've read a scientific paper, what if your friend says, well, what did that paper mean? Tell me about it. Can you explain it? It's very hard to explain in kind of layman's terms or kind of, common terms what a paper talks about. So takes a little practice to do that, and you'll be doing that with an article this week. There are there's a whole workbook on how to make data talk, how to talk about a scientific research so that people can understand it. You don't have to read this whole thing. It's huge, but it's out there just in case you ever need it. Okay, so what are we going to do for the worksheet? At this point, you should be able to, after reading this document, you should be able to do the pre-lab quiz. Then you'll move on to the worksheet. On the worksheet, you get to choose to read one of two different articles that are linked here. One of them is called Dung Beetles Use the Milky Way for Orientation. That sounds kind of cool. It's kind of up my alley a little bit more on behavioral research. And one of them is called Bacterial Contamination of Shopping Carts and Approaches to Control. Well, that sounds a little bit trendy because we're always talking about COVID and viral contamination of objects in COVID. So that looks interesting as well. That's not super recent. Okay. So the first thing you'll want to do is pick your article. Which one do you want to read? So you can look at them and we can open them up. Here there's links to them. Each one of these is short, all right? It has a summary or an abstract. Ooh. Should have a background information. This one doesn't seem to have background information. Oh, that's interesting. Huh. All right. This one's going to be an interesting one to read. I'm interested in this topic. The second article is Bacterial Contamination of Shopping Carts. This one has a little bit more normal flow. It has a summary and then an introduction, a methods section, a results section, and finally a discussion section with references at the end. All right. And then here it gives you an idea of what you need to do to complete the assignment. But I want to go to the assignment itself at this point. So I'm going to move on. I'm going to take my pre-lab quiz. That's due on January 28th. And then I'm going to move on to my assignment. So I'm going to click on my assignment first. Got to get to it. Okay, here's my assignment. The first thing I need to do is record the complete citation of my assigned paper in the box. You may choose to read either paper presented in the exercise 2 document. So all I have to do is copy and paste my citation from that document into this box. That's super easy. But also it tells me that I should be using APA guidelines for formatting citations. So if you haven't used those before, there's some links here that can help you identify how to write your citations in APA style. I use the Another Tool button. That's my favorite one. And then you're going to start answering some questions. Read the introduction. What's the big question the paper is trying to ask? Summarize the background information. What specific predictions do the authors make? Ooh, describe the methods that are used and describe them by making a diagram of the methods. So this is going to be a picture that you're going to draw it out, take a picture of it, and insert it here. Okay. Read the results and the conclusion sections. What do they mean? Are there any weaknesses to this study? Now, once you've read that study, go and find another paper that relates to it and give me the complete citation. Where'd you find it? What's the big question the paper is trying to address? Give me a picture of the first page of the paper that you found. And that's it. So the idea here is practice reading a scientific article. That's it. And explaining it to me. This time, to me. This should be done by Friday at 5 p.m. As our typical assignments are due. And if you have any questions, you may email me about this project. And I think that's all I have to say.